Oh, that's right. We're right here at Sharp Facets this morning. I have a fascinating person that I'm sitting down with. Liza Alther is here with us. She was here yesterday afternoon out there at Piedmont Tech. They've got a one book, one college series, and her book was chosen, Blood Feud, the Hatfields and the McCoys. And they've had a whole month, and this was the culmination yesterday afternoon. But she's been writing books for many, many years, and very, very successful author. And I'm very pleased to have her sitting here with me today. Liza, how you doing today?
Hi, Ann. I'm just fine, and I really appreciate your having me on.
Well, this is going to be fun to talk to you've sold lots of books, millions and millions, I understand.
That's what they tell me.
You know, it's not many people that are able to make a true living selling books and being an author. So it's very impressive that you're here with us today. But I'm always interested when somebody was growing up. You grew up, I think you told me, in Kingsport, Tennessee?
Yes, that's right.
Did you always want to be an author, or did you have other visions as you were growing up?
I didn't always want to be an author. I think that's because when I was a kid, we had a neighborhood gang, and I also had 4 siblings. And we did plays and things like that all the time. So I think that satisfied my need for drama. I didn't start writing fiction until I was about 16, and I was working on the school newspaper.
But what did you want? Then what did you want to be? Then what did you think you would grow up to be?
Well, I went off to college, and I don't know. And I didn't really think. You know, I was just trying to get my degree. Yeah.
You know, but that was back in the day when we didn't have to make up our mind in 8th grade, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And also, I think a lot of women assumed they would get married and, wouldn't necessarily have a career.
Sure.
But once I
realized...
Actually,
going to college was to find the husband, to get married, to settle down and have a family, right?
Yeah. But most of my friends did go on for advanced degrees and planned to have jobs. And once I realized that that was what I was supposed to be doing, I think I did hope that I could be a writer and that I could make a living that way, since it was seemingly my only talent. I was on the newspaper at college also. So I got out and I started writing short stories and sending them off to the New Yorker, thinking they would, of course, publish them, but they didn't. And I sent them and nobody wanted to publish them, and I just collected a lot of rejection slips, and so I realized I wasn't going to be able to make a living that way, and I went into publishing for a while.
That has to be getting rejection notices and to still persist. What do you look back at? Would you like to send any of those rejection notices and say, "Ha! See what I did today"?
Well, that was pretty much what kept me going. Was that I kept telling myself, one day they'll be sorry. They're so obnoxious. They're these little printed slips, and they say things like, "We hate your story and we wish you were dead." So I thought, well, I'll make them sorry. So I used it to motivate me, but it was pretty discouraging, day after day to have rejection slips.
Absolutely. Now, one of the magazines that you have had things in was Art and Antiques.
Yes.
That's one of our favorite magazines, of course, here at Sharp Facets Gallery. What exactly did you put in Art and Antiques? Do you remember, or what type of... I mean, I was just curious, since you do novels and everything, what would have been in Art and Antiques?
I'm sorry, I can't remember what that article was.
Okay.
But I knew I was living in New York at the time, and I was working in publishing, and I knew the editor of Art and Antiques, and he commissioned me to do an article, and I'm just drawing a blank on what it was.
Okay. So you were actually commissioned. It wasn't one of your novelettes or anything like that?
No. I did freelance journalism. That was my other way of making money. And I wrote about the arts, some in New York, some for the New York Times, and also this piece for Art and Antiques that I can't remember.
Well, I think you must have had a fascinating life. Now, I read that you also live in Vermont and spend your time in Vermont, New York, and in Tennessee.
Yes.
Why Vermont?
Well, Well,
I'm from Maine originally,
Oh,
just
you
for the
are?
record.
Oh.
I'm from Maine originally, yeah.
Well, the great drama of my life has been, I had a father who was a Southerner and a mother who was from upstate New York. And I've always tried to bring the two, the red state and the blue state ethos together in my own head. And I used to think that I had to pick one over the other. You know, I could love the South and hate the North or vice versa. And finally I realized that I could love both places and for different reasons and live in both places. But Vermont, because I went to college near Boston, and I met a Yankee and married, and he loved Vermont and had been there in the summers and thought he could get a job there. So we moved up there, and
it's a beautiful state. It's a
it
beautiful
is beautiful.
state,
Yeah. And we're divorced now, but my daughter and grandsons live up there, and I have a condo, so I can go up there and spend a lot of time with them. And Tennessee, because I grew up there and I love it, and I was taking care of my parents for the last dozen years, and New York because I love New York, and I have to do business there fairly often. So
absolutely. Do you ski?
I did ski, but I had a slip disc and I had a back operation, and now I can't ski. I do a little bit of cross country.
Cross country, all right.
Do you?
Well, I used to. I used to be a racer, actually, downhill racer. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
absolutely. Yeah. Well,
Nice.
well, you know, what else was there to do in Maine? Hello. So that used to be the family pastime. Spend the weekends all weekend. Yeah.
Where in Maine?
Well, a little town called South Paris, Norway, Lewiston. I know Lewiston, that
Maine.
area. Yeah.
A beautiful state.
Beautiful state. You're right. We used to ski over there at Conway, right
Oh,
over there, in New Hampshire. So, but yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's changed a lot, but still hard to make a living, I think, up there unless you're in tourism.
Yes. Yeah.
So. But, gosh, we have so much to talk about. You have written so many books. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to be talking about books. Hey, if you've got a question for Eliza here this morning, don't hesitate to give us a call, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. We'll be right back. Oh, that's right. We are right back here with Liza Alther. She is an author. That is a mouthful, Liza.
Alther.
Yeah, there you go. So, you know, when you actually wrote your first novel, what did you say to yourself? I'm going to write this novel. It was what, Kinflix?
Right.
Right?
Right. Well, I at that time I was in Vermont, and I had a small baby, and I realized that writing was something that I could do while she took her naps, and it didn't cost anything. And so I decided I had written about 15 short stories by this point, and I decided, well, I'll try something long now, and I'll try to do a novel. And actually, Kinflix was my third novel. I wrote two other novels that were kind of like, weren't published. They were like I was teaching myself to write while I did them.
Rejection notice.
Yeah, I sent them out and got them rejected. And so on my third one, I finally felt I had something maybe somebody would take, and they did take it, and it was a bestseller. So it really was a great thing for me, because I finally made some money, and I wanted to buy a Jaguar or something, but I decided I'd better, I might never ever earn any money from my writing again, so I'd better invest it and pay myself a salary so I could keep writing what I wanted to at my own pace. So that's what I did, and it really kind of set me up for the rest of my career. So I was very, very lucky, because as you say, most fiction writers have a hard time making ends meet without a day job.
Yeah. I would have wanted the Jaguar.
I still want it. Well, the best advice an older writer told me, I said, what advice would you give somebody who wants to be a writer? And he said, the most important thing is to keep your overhead low. So I paid attention to that, and I did it, and it was what really allowed me to keep writing and not have to.
It allows your mind to be free, right?
Yeah, and also you don't have to do other jobs. You have all your time for writing, and you can write what you want to write instead of having to take commissions.
Sure, absolutely. Now, Kinflix, it sounds to me like it might be a little bit about your growing up life, because for those that don't know about it, let's see. It says here that her, Ginny Blaylock, 27, cast out adulterous wife and unfit mother en route to Hillsborough, Tennessee, in her own mother's hospital bed, and her father is dead, and her family home is on the auction block. And her home movies, her uncensored Kinflix, her first never tell padded bra. I mean, this book sounds like, right out of the 60s here. What do you have to say? Any relationship to your growing up, honey?
Well, I always deny that it's autobiographical, but it certainly was based on what I knew and what I had experienced growing up in Kingsport. The main character was not particularly based on me, but it was certainly based on people that I knew, things that I had heard about, things that I read in the National Enquirer. Everything that I knew, I put into the book. So the people in my town spent a lot of time trying to figure out which character was which real person. But when you're writing, you aren't really necessarily trying to base it on some real person. You might base it on 4 or 5 real people. You take somebody's nose and somebody else's car and somebody else's mother, and you mush them all together, and the characters at some point really start to come alive to you, but they're not any real person.
Wow. Okay. So, and what did you tell me, that the newspaper or something studied up on who the football numbers were? And
yes,
everything?
There's one of the main activities in the town, of course, is the football games, and the quarterback is in there, and so the town newspaper wrote an article in which they analyzed the jersey numbers that I gave my characters, trying to figure out which football players were which real football players on the team when I had been in school. And I have to say, in a couple of cases, they came pretty close.
Did you ever tell them you're on it?
No, in fact, I denied it.
Well, you heard it right here on WCRS. I wonder if it'll ever get back to Kingsport, Tennessee.
Let's hope not.
All right. Well, that was your first one. That kind of sets you up, I guess, for the future. And, you've written several. I was amazed. They've been translated into all these different languages and everything. How does that make you feel to see this?
It's been a wonderful ride. I've really had a career that I've enjoyed tremendously. It did amaze me that I think they were translated into 17 languages, and I just couldn't imagine what people in Japan or Turkey or Romania would make of these really kind of archetypal American characters, football players and cheerleaders and flag swingers, but apparently the core experience of growing up is similar, no matter what your culture is. The kind of stresses and strains and pleasures that you experience are universal.
Do you write about sex in the books?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, that's good, because that's probably one of the motivators right there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
seems...
what's universal, I guess.
Exactly. But we want to talk actually a good bit about your latest book, which is about the Hatfields and McCoys, the blood, what is it called? The Blood Feud.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was the basis on that? Why would you want to write a book about that, and what was the basis for it?
Well, it's a narrative history, and the reason I started thinking about it was that my editor in New York asked me to write it, and he said there hadn't been a book for a general readership in about 30 years about the feud. So I started looking into it and realized that was true, and I also realized that there's a bunch of new information that hadn't been included in the previous books that had been written about the role of the feudists in the Civil War, and the Hatfield family themselves had published a couple of new volumes of memoirs about the feud. And also nobody had written about the point of view of the bystanders, the women and the children and the peaceful people in that area, of whom there were a lot, and families that moved away to escape the violence and the later generations who were impacted by the feud. So I decided it was a good idea and went ahead with it. And while I was doing it, I discovered that several of my distant ancestors had been on the fringes of the feud activities, which I hadn't known about. So it became almost a hybrid of a narrative history plus a little bit of a memoir about the impact of what those ancestors of mine experienced on me.
Absolutely. So, have you seen that special that they've done on the Hatfields and McCoys?
I did, yeah. My editor said, watch it and take notes about the ways in which it's inaccurate. So in case anybody asks you. So I started doing that, and I had 3 or 4 yellow pages, legal pad pages, of things that weren't accurate. And then I thought, this isn't any fun. I'm not enjoying this. So I just put that aside, and I started watching it as a good story.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy it. There was a lot that wasn't historically accurate, but it was a good tale. It was more like a Western than like something that would have happened in the Southern Appalachians. There was a saloon there with a madam that never would have existed in Kentucky in the 1880s. But they did a good job, I think, with some of the characters, especially Kevin Costner did a great job with Devil Anse Hatfield. And it really, the book came out right at the time the miniseries came out, so the book sailed.
Good timing.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a coincidence.
It wasn't. Okay.
I was writing it, and the editor called me up, and he said, "This is going to happen. So if you can hurry up and get it done and turn it in, we'll bring it out earlier than we had planned to take advantage of this free publicity." So I was able to finish it early, and it was really a wonderful thing for the book sales.
Absolutely, that's terrific. So what was the most, as far as working on this book, how long did you work on it? It had to take a good while from the research aspect, I would think.
Well, I had a contract that gave me about 2 years to write it. So I did all the research, and I had started writing it the research took me about half a year, and then I had started writing it when my editor called and said, can you get it in 6 months early? So I went at it.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I went
you
at
had
it.
started writing it, and they wanted it early. Okay.
Yeah, I went at it day and night for months, and that was, I was able to finish it, but it was much faster than anything I've ever written. I usually take 4 or 5 years on a book, so
Wow.
It was a good experience for me because it showed me that, I had to make decisions very quickly. I couldn't mull them over the way I usually do. And it was a good lesson that I can do things faster than I think I can. So maybe that'll help me in future books.
Have you got another one already in your mind?
No, I've had a really busy year. I had 3 books come out this year. There was the Hatfield McCoy one and a volume of short stories that came out last month. Called Stormy Weather, and then about a year ago I had a historical novel come out called Washed in the Blood. So I've been going around doing readings for a year now, and I'm kind of tired, so I think I'll take a sabbatical for a while.
Well, I don't blame you at all. Hey, I am here with Liza Alther. We are going to hear South Carolina news, a word from our sponsors. Yes, and when we come back, we're going to be right here with her. So if you've got a question, if something pops to your mind, if you have a question about the blood feud, the Hatfields and the McCoys, something that we're always interested here down in the South, why don't you give us a call, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. News is up. We'll be back.
Arg, are you a pirate or a pack rat? Do you have a vacation of a lifetime sitting in the attic? Or a college tuition hung on a wall? Or is a fabulous retirement hidden in your jewelry box? Bring those items to Sharp Facets Gallery. We can establish value and buy from you or sell for you. And so ends another chapter at Sharp Facets Gallery. 72 Bypass, and on the web, sharpfacets.com.
Oh, that's right. We're right back here with Liza Alther right here. She is a world-famous author. I guess we'd have to say world-famous. Her books have been translated into, I think she told me earlier, 17 different languages. Phenomenal. She was here with Piedmont Tech with their One Book, One College series, and they were doing a spotlight on the novel, brand new novel actually, Blood Feud, the Hatfields and McCoys. And Liza, you were telling me that you had a 2-year contract. You actually had done what, maybe a year's worth of research?
Yeah.
Thought you were going to spend a year maybe writing this novel, and the publisher called and said, "Hey, the Hatfields and McCoys are coming out on a mini-series. Can you get that book done early?"
Right. Yeah. So I went double time on that and was able to finish it. It's actually a narrative history.
Narrative history.
Not a novel.
Oh, so, okay, so
yeah. It's a. I try to stay as true to the facts as I could, but also to use some fictional techniques to try to make that kind of dry history come alive.
Well, there's actually been a resurgence in that type of work. I mean, Bill O'Reilly and his Killing Lincoln, and now Killing Kennedy. I mean, all these books are really coming back. Why do you think that is, that people are becoming fascinated about the past?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Probably because we don't get it in school anymore.
Yeah.
No, but
well, those of us who love history, which I really love history, you look, I guess, to history to try to explain your present. One thing that interested me in the Hatfield-McCoy feud was trying to figure out how there were 80 men involved in the feud, about 40 on each side, and they represented less than 1% of the population of the 2 counties in which they lived, and yet they managed to terrorize 9,000 people for 25 years. So, I thought if I could understand how that could happen back then, maybe I could better understand terrorism now, or Bosnia, where that happened, or Rwanda, or the various places where just a handful of people are able to ruin the lives for thousands of people around them.
Well, how did you come to a conclusion? You want to share that here this morning?
Well, I did a whole chapter on what the factors that I thought played into causing the feud, or making people willing to, in my opinion, waste their lives. For 25 years, these people just spent all their time plotting how to kill each other and do each other in. And there were a lot of factors involved. It started with raids that went on during the Civil War. There were deserters and draft dodgers and soldiers and home guards, and they were all living off the land, so they took the supplies from civilians, and they would burn down the houses and barns of their enemies. And so that was the atmosphere of the area, and it's what really started the feud, and then it continued with various episodes for 25 years. So it was complicated. There were so many factors.
Isn't that what teenagers tell us? It's complicated. I love that when an employee tells me, "Well, what happened here, Aunt?" It's complicated.
Yeah, right. One of the main factors, I'm sorry to say, was alcohol. Everything was fueled by moonshine. The amounts that those people drank was just astonishing,
and they were still standing.
Yeah. And then, in some cases they would go kill each other because their inhibitions were loosened, and I don't know. It was a very sad time and sad series of events. It's hard for me to see it as heroic in any way. The miniseries tried to, present some of it as people defending their family honor, but the reality of it to me was pretty pretty sad.
Now, what you said that some of your family was part of the outside on the fringes.
Yeah.
How did you discover that?
Well, I was researching particularly the Civil War, the role of the different people who fought in the feud. For the most part, the Hatfields who fought in the feud were Confederates, and the McCoys who fought in the feud were Union, although there was crossing back and forth. Some Hatfields were Union and some McCoys were Confederates. But going through the troop rosters to see who was where, I found the names of some of my relatives, or ancestors, distant ancestors. So it made me go back to some oral histories that I had. And I found out that most of my ancestors fought for the Union, although they lived in Southwest Virginia. And I found that they were in the same units as some of the feud people. And I also found that one of them had been murdered by a man who was killed some people during the feud. The uncle of Lance Hatfield, named Jim Vance, killed one of the McCoys right at the end of the Civil War, and then he went to Southwest Virginia and he killed one of my ancestors. So it was interesting to have a personal connection to it. It really brought it home to me and made me start thinking about why my grandparents had left that area and the whole topic of feuds and violence. And
so you'd heard some things.
I had heard some things, yeah, from my grandparents and from my father.
Wow. So, did you go to the areas and did you talk to any of the people or anything that are still descendants of?
Yes, I went several times up to the area. Was the Tug Fork Valley, and it divides West Virginia from Kentucky. And I went there a number of times. And one of my relatives by marriage is named Ava McCoy. She married a man named Homer McCoy, who was the grandson of McCoys who fought in the feud. So she's 96 now, I guess, and
wow.
She has a total recall, and she told me a lot about what she was born 25 years after the feud ended, but she remembered a lot of what her family members had told her about the feud. She grew up in the feud area, and also what her husband's family had told her. So it was like having a first-hand tie to the feud in a way. Somebody who actually knew people who had fought in the feud. I also interviewed some other McCoys and some Hatfields, and I attended. They have a big reunion there every year, a joint reunion.
A joint reunion?
Yeah, of Hatfields and McCoys.
How about that?
Yeah, no, everybody gets along fine because, even back during the feud, everybody was intermarried. For instance, my family is related by marriage to the McCoys, but also to the Hatfields, and that's true for a lot of the people up there. So they're all intermarried and related, some kind of cousin to one another. And the first feud they held...
why do they talk about Southerners the way they do?
Well, the first year they had the feud, 5,000 people came, Hatfields and McCoys from all over the country, and everybody now gets along fine. If they talk about it, they joke about it. So blessedly, it seems to have the wounds seem to have healed.
How about that? So they actually have a reunion every year.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they have the final episode in the reunion is the Tug Fork River divides the Hatfield territory from the McCoys, and they have a tug of war across the river.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Hey, I'm here with Liza Alther. She has a new book out. We're talking about that. It's been the feature book out there at Piedmont Tech. Blood Feud, the Hatfields and the McCoys. If you've got a question for her, this is your opportunity. Give us a call, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. We'll be right back. That's right. We are right back here with Liza Alther. She has written a fascinating book, The Blood Feud, The Hatfields and the McCoys. It's a historical...
A narrative history.
Narrative history. If you're into history, if you like being entertained, this book has done very, very well out there. I tell you what, she started out, she got a lot of rejection early on in life, and I guess that motivated you to keep going, right?
It did. Yeah.
And
it could have been very discouraging, and I could have given up, but I decided to use it to make me angry and make me try harder. So it worked out.
And you have written, how many books have you written?
Well, I've done 6 novels, 1 memoir, 1 volume of short stories, this Hatfield McCoy book, and a novella. So that's 10.
10.
Yeah, my goal was always to write 7 books and then retire, but I seem to not be ready for that yet.
You know, it's amazing how we set goals when we're at number 1, right?
Well, 7 just sounded impossible to me back then, but, you know, they just keep happening, so I guess I'll keep going for a while.
Now, you said you have been doing all these book tours and you're taking, I guess, a little time off. Is that what you decided to do?
Yes, right. A friend and I have a small RV, and we want to travel around the U.S. I've only ever crossed the country once, and I haven't seen much of this country, so I really want to dig in.
There's a lot of great stuff out there, isn't there? You know, when you really start looking at it and seeing the things, and you know, I think that is one thing, we get so hung up in our small lives, right? Our little circles, that we don't get outside our circle very often sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you know that this is a huge country, but I think you don't really feel it until you drive across it and you see how huge it is, but also how various, you know, the different topographies, and how incredibly magnificent it is. It just blew my mind the one time I drove cross country, so I want to do that again.
How long ago was that?
It was just about 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just doing it again, huh?
Yeah, so I want to go back for more.
So any possibilities there'll be a book coming out of this?
Well, I never
Travel
say never.
guide.
I never say never. It's not my intention, but everything eventually seems to work its way into a book for me. It seems to be how I make sense of what I've experienced and process it. So probably there'll be a book.
Probably there'll be a book. That sounds great. Well, what is there one book that you're most proud of all the books you've written?
Well, it's funny. It's kind of like your children. You know, you love them all, but the youngest is the one that you're focused on at the time. So I guess right now my most recent one is my short story book. It's called Stormy Weather and Other Stories, and it's the one that I'm mostly reading from right now at bookstores. And so I guess for the moment it's my favorite.
Why did you name it Stormy Weather, just out of curiosity?
Well, one of the stories in the book, one of the long stories, is called Stormy Weather, and it was named, the story was named that because of the song.
Yeah, I know. I was getting ready to break into songs.
Yeah,
Stormy Weather.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs, and it recurs in this particular story, and so I had to come up with a title. I decided I'd never done a collection of short stories, so I've been writing them for 50 years, so I went back and picked my dozen favorite out of the ones I'd written and put them into a volume, and then I had to pick a title, and for some reason that one just popped into my mind and stuck, and probably because I love that song so much.
Yeah, it's a great song. Now, what would you say to somebody that, because I know there's a lot of people listening out here, and we all think we have a story to tell and a story to write, and you've been through rejection and the height of success. What would you have to say to people that are trying to write a book?
Well, I think it's true that everybody does have a story to tell, and the important part of the writing process, I guess, is to give it time. And to let the story emerge, and it often isn't the story you think it's going to be. So people tend to get bogged down, I think, in doing outlines and thinking they have to know at the beginning what the story's going to be. And so I think my main advice would be to set yourself free and just write whatever comes into your head, because you can always do a later draft and take out the things that don't fit. But when I'm trying to write, I often just write the scenes that pop into my head, and then later I see if I can rearrange them, that they work as a story. So I guess that's it, not to be too strict with yourself, just to let yourself play with the scenes as they come into your head, and to keep at it. I mean, everybody wants to discourage you and reject you, but if it's something that you enjoy, just keep at it.
Just keep at it.
And I think you need to do it because you're enjoying it and because it's something you feel you want to do and need to do, and just not worry about how other people view it or receive it.
Should you let other people read your work as you're working on it? You know, because a lot of people read this, see what you think.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably helpful once you've got a pretty substantial draft. But I would say not while you're in the process of letting it emerge, because other people often mean well, but they can say things that dampen your process.
Spirit and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think once you feel you have something substantial that you feel pretty confident about, then it's good to let other people read it and give some feedback and either accept it or reject it, because sometimes people can say very helpful things, and other times it can be hurtful and can discourage you. So I think you need to feel solid within yourself.
Absolutely. Now I want to ask you another question. You know, the Kindles and all these downloadable books, what do you think is the future of books? You know, you think about books and you think about how nice they are to hold in your hand, and yet we have a whole culture that is becoming, oh, is it downloadable? Got it. Okay, I'm reading it. What do you think?
Well, I guess because of the generation I am, I do love the actual physical book and paper and type style and jackets and the cloth bindings and that kind of thing. But I also have a Kindle because I travel a lot and it's so incredibly convenient. You know, I just load my Kindle up with a dozen books and I don't have to drag around a sack of print books. So it appears that e-books are becoming more and more popular, and there's a lot to be said for them in terms of convenience and not having a book that you have to either shelve or dispose of at the end. But I think there'll always be print books, maybe for a minority population of people who still
the aging population is
the aging population. But I think the important, I don't feel too discouraged about it, because I think delivery methods have always changed. Sure. Monks used to write out books by hand, and then we had the printing press, and now we've got e-books. So the delivery method changes, but there will always be a need for the story. E-books have to have a story to go into them, so I think there'll always be a place for storytellers. I think people have an innate need to tell and hear stories. So
that's how so much history actually we wouldn't have a lot of our history if we hadn't had storytellers transferring it from one generation to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
For a long time. Yeah.
So there's always been a place for that, and I think there always will be. It's just that the way it's delivered to us will change.
Absolutely. This has been a fascinating time to talk with you, Liza. I'm so glad that you had the time to be able to sit down and talk with us here on the I Love Ann show. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's really pleasant to be able to sit back and have a discussion, which doesn't happen too much anymore.
Well, that's true. It doesn't. So where are you off to now?
I'm heading back home to Piney Flats, Tennessee.
Piney Flats, Tennessee.
Yep.
Sounds like Rocky Top to me.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
Well, you have a beautiful day to be going back up there, and I certainly hope that maybe we can keep in touch and when you come back close to this area, maybe we can get you back on the radio with us.
I'd love that. Thank you very much, Anne.
Absolutely. This has been another I Love Anne show with Liza Alther right here. She is the author of Blood Feud, The Hatfields, and the McCoys, and she's just got her favorite book, she says, Stormy Weather, with a collection of short stories. Hey, I'm Ann Eller. This is WCRS right here in Greenwood. Thanks so much for being here today, Liza.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
All righty. Bye-bye, everybody.